I think the locals spotted me. What you up to, Ed?
I can look what is. This one is ridiculous. It was originally a $7 book. I marked it down to $2.95. These wholesalers take off the 95 cents, so they sell it for $2 and make $1 on this book. Absurd.
And you sold 2 tarot decks today, correct?
Yeah. Plus a guidebook to the Andean Republic. Muslim religious books here, tarot decks here. I have my music collections here. Photography, travel, old magazines. This is really cool. I discovered a big collection of old magazines like this. These are some of my
Weird Tales.
These are some of my top bestsellers.
Really?
Now, you know where these all came from? Steve, my son-in-law, who he had an employer who wanted him to throw out his father's book collection. Here are still, this is what remains of the books that I've yet to look at. I've never looked at these books. They're like 15, I bought them 15 years ago.
Wow.
And,
there might be some gems in there worth like hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, and so I'm gradually working my way in. And when I get through this, I'll probably quit the book business. I've been,
So here's all the books that.
okay, with this one.
Sure. Okay, Ed, tell us all about it.
Okay, well, these are the books that I put out, and there would be a lot more if I hadn't wasted most of my life. But here it is. This is the first book I published. I went to Europe for a year in '65, hitchhiked around, had a lot of adventures, and when I came back, I found, it was like I had found a secret that nobody talked about. You could read other guidebooks and they didn't talk about the secret, that you could go there, have a fantastic time on very little money. And all the other guidebooks were about going there and having a shitty time and spending a lot of money. So this was my kind of breakthrough book. Wow, you want to go to Europe on very low cost and have a great time. So this is the one that we looked at earlier, but this is the one that has both drawings of me and photos of me in Europe. Here I am in Germany.
That's a great picture.
Drinking beer, yeah, I love this. It was my first attempt to kind of put out this what I thought was this fabulous thing that I had found out, that you can go to Europe, screw the other guidebooks, and just invent your own trip, and for very little money. So there was a second edition that I published, which is basically the same. But this was a big hit when they first came out. And then from that, I decided to expand it into a book called Vagabonding in Europe. And this was initially turned down by some New York publishers, but the guy who distributed this book said, hey, I will publish your book. And he started a publishing company. This was the first book he published.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, so... And he had a publishing arrangement with Random House. So his company was the Bookworks in Berkeley, and he was first just a book distributor, and he knew about these books because he distributed them. And when my book was turned down in New York, he said, hey, forget that, I'll publish it. And it came out through Random House. And then this went through several printings and editions, and then Random House said, hey, we'll give you a contract to do a similar book on the USA. So that's how this book came about. And this was the first edition, also co-published by Bookworks and Random House. So again, illustrated with photos and drawings. And this book also was a success and led to actually this book came first. Vagabonding in the USA by Andor Press was reprinted, and then when Andor dropped it, I revised it here into Vagabonding in America, and I like this book much better than this one. Because for one thing, you can put it in your back pocket.
Always important when you're hitchhiking around Europe and America.
More of a road book. So, and you know, to this day, I still get. This past week, somebody in Europe is sending me a copy of one of these books, so that I can autograph it and he can give it to his son, I believe. And I get fan letters all the time saying, basically, I read your book in the 70s. It changed my life. Thank you very much. And that's the real reward. You know, it's very hard to make money as a writer, but the real payoff is the fact that I made an impact on many, many, many people's
Absolutely,
lives.
including me.
Right.
People need to realize that every page you see on this table, I probably read 10 times. I was obsessed with these books for a long time. I had them memorized. I had some of these books memorized.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. You could quote phrases out of the book over and over. So then this was the last version of it, which is my favorite version. My last word on the topic before Vagabonding itself became obsolete. So then after that, I did the Tarot Triumphs. So my then wife, Mary Kay Greer, one of the most eminent Tarotists in the world, I edited all her books, and I kind of absorbed osmotically the Tarot. And in these other books, I quote William Blake a lot. He was one of my favorite authors. And I thought, wow, what about, because Mary was a Tarotist and I was learning Tarot through editing her books, I had the idea for a William Blake deck. So this was the first version, was just the Tarot Triumphs, 22 Triumphs. And I printed it in two colors, blue and red, which kind of reflected a lot of Blakean colors. And then I overprinted these two colors. I chose them so that they would make black when they were overprinted. So this was done as a two-color photo job because this was all done on a thin dime. And what I did is I photographed artwork. I made photostats of Blake's artwork, and then I had the negatives, and I put the negatives on the light table, and I strengthened lines with a razor blade. And I added some new lines so I wouldn't have any copyright considerations. But this book was created by working on a light table with full-size negatives and kind of guessing, because I had to have two sets of plates, the red plates and the blue plates, and trying to figure out how do I do this, as a novice.
Probably a lot similar to how Ed did it.
I never had any training in writing and publishing, whatever. Everything I had to figure out for myself, and this book is a good example of it, my last one. So anyway...
Well, Ed, can I stop you just for 1 minute?
Yeah.
There might be some folks that aren't even familiar with what a Tarot or the Tarot deck is. Can you just briefly explain that?
Yes, well, the Tarot deck, as it now exists, they consider it a divination system, to where, like, you can read your fortune or something. Now, I don't think that tarot cards predict the future, but they give you a different take on the present. So you ask the cards a question, and
Yeah,
an open deck?
Yep, you have some right here.
So here's an open deck, and I'll go over these separately, but just to give you an idea. So these are images collaged from William Blake, the artist's work. So I've taken some of his poetry on some of the cards, and I renamed the suits. Like the traditional tarot was, the tarot we use now was invented in 1910. The Waite Smith tarot, which is the most popular tarot deck in the world. and which is much copied and imitated. So this was a reinvention of the traditional tarot. I used the same number of cards, but I renamed the suits, and I added one card to the deck, the 00 card, which is
That's infinity, or?
the infinity card, right? So I modified the tarot. My tarotist wife was a little upset, not entirely supportive. But now many people think that this is the greatest tarot deck ever invented and the most beautiful.
Yeah.
So it's now in its second edition. This was the first edition, which was published by HarperCollins in England, and it was a blue deck instead of green. So to differentiate the second edition. So this deck, was inside the box with a book.
Mm-hmm.
So now this second edition comes without the book, but there's a free book online that anybody who buys, or anybody at all, can download the book or read it online or download it onto their own computer. So it comes with the book online, and the cards are the second edition. I also modified the cards considerably, just in terms of correcting some mistakes in the first edition and relettering some of the cards, and I consider it, and the images are a little bit bigger in the second edition, and there will be a third edition, if I live that long, in which I want to enhance the colors even more. I'm going to play around with some fluorescent inks to try to really bring up the colors, which is my only complaint with this deck, is that it could have a little more brilliance.
Well, how about a little later we'll maybe go over each individual card,
we can go over them, right.
So you published some poetry.
Yes, and then I started writing poetry, so I have presently 2 poetry books, and I have material for a lot more. But this was based on a trip that my girlfriend Deborah and I went for 3 months all over the Southwest, and I tried to write a poem a day, and there are a lot of photos that go with this, but I only put one of them on the cover. It's a matter of money. I self-published this in an edition of a couple hundred copies, and this is my next one, for which I did all the layout. I had to learn how to do this program, but it's a very personal book. Here's my mom.
Mm-hmm.
Here's my dad in his coffin. I've got my daughter. My daughter is in this book. My deceased daughter. There she is.
You have 3 daughters.
Right. So here's my daughter Jan, and here she is at the funeral home with me, very broken up about it. It'll be 15 years this year that she died. But I love some of the layout I did in this. It's just photo. Here's me in Warsaw. Capitalism is exploitation. Capitalism equals exploitation. Love it. A sign in Poland that I loved. I stopped the car to take a picture of this poster. So great. Beauties of Warsaw is the name of this poem. And just all over the place. But I love the combination of photos and poetry that I put in here, and learning like this one was such a bitch, man. This is me at Burning Man. Here's my 2 legs.
I should. You keep bringing that picture up.
This is my underwear that says, "Why am I God?" That is the essential question we all have to ask ourselves. Why am I God?
So Ed, you've been to Burning Man several times.
20 straight years.
Wow.
But I stopped going because it's gotten too expensive, too crowded, too corrupt. But it was great for 20 years. I stopped going 4 or 5 years ago. So anyway, and then I want to do more poetry books. I want to write more about my tarot. I want to do another book on the tarot. And I'd like to do a complete book about my photos from Europe, my year in Europe. So photos and journal entries. So I have a lot of ideas for more books, but time is running out.
Well, Ed, the secret to immortality is to just never stop coming up with new projects, right?
The secret to immortality is don't die.
Which means just keep writing more books.
So let's look at these cards.
Okay.
Put these aside, and you can put some of these cards up.
Okay. So what are you doing there, Ed?
Pulling out the 4 suit cards.
Oh yeah, the science, the man of science card.
Yep.
Anytime I pull that one, I'm always a little scared.
So this deck is based on. There are 4 suits in the traditional tarot, and they're named after magical talismans used in the 19th century. So I changed, following William Blake's example, I renamed the suits after what Blake called the 4 arts in eternity: painting, science, music, and poetry. And then there's the major arcana, 21 cards. Like this is, what is this called in the traditional tarot?
Isn't that Satan?
Yeah, this is Satan in the card, but there's another card. The card before is Satan. Oh, this is the collapsing tower, or it's got various names. But I renamed many of the major arcana cards, and the renaming of the suits after the arts was like really a powerful insight into the cards, and that makes this a deck for artists and creative people, because the whole emphasis has changed in the deck. In the tarot, it's based on, the traditional tarot is based on the idea of 19th century magic, where you manipulate magical talismans. So, like painting in the traditional tarot is pentacles, which is, a 5-pointed star. It's a magical talisman. Science is swords. In the traditional tarot, music is wands, and poetry is what? I don't even know. I don't use the traditional tarot at all. This is the only deck I've ever read with. But to emphasize the arts, the magical arts, instead of the magical talismans, is a brilliant new way to look at the cards. And I renamed the court cards, man, woman, child, instead of kings, queens, and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the really beautiful thing, you see, Blake, through the human imagination, we can, perform magic. So the 19th century, they needed talismans, they needed pentacles, for example.
Well, Ed, I'm sorry. Let me ask this question. So, maybe you could tell us a little more about William Blake and why you think he's, something special.
Well, Blake was one of the great geniuses of all time. He lived in the 19th century. Like, his period was 1757 to 1827, 70 years, and that was the time of the French Revolution, the American Revolution, the Industrial Revolution. He lived in very revolutionary times, but he was like an early forerunner of, he read the Bible. He said the Bible was the most important book of imagination ever created, but he saw it as an imaginative rather than a religious thing. And he himself was anti-religious, I would say, but he totally believed in the power of the human imagination, which he said was the divine power in man.
Would it be accurate to say that William Blake believed that imagination was reality, or imagination came first before everything else?
Yeah, I think you could say that, because he said, for example, that nature can't exist without man. It's like we imagine nature, we see nature, and therefore it exists. So everything exists in our imagination. So that was what was revolutionary about, as I say, the 19th century Tarotist magicians used this idea of mechanical energy, because in the 19th century that was the era of great mechanical marvels. They dug all the mines, they built bridges, it was like mechanical engineering was this fantastic art form. So the magicians used they had these mechanical analogs. So, but Blake said, like, for example, a mechanical analog might be you use a pentacle and you create a spell, and then maybe you could envision something going on in another realm, for example. But Blake said, why mess around with talismans, mechanical objects? Let's just use our imaginations and go there, create it immediately in our mind. So it's like it's as fast as the speed of thought, and it's a much more modern way of thinking about the world. We create the world through our imaginations, not through magical processes. So that's the idea that underlies these cards, is that.
So you live in basically the basement of your own house.
Right. And this used to be a metalworking shop, actually, in the basement. But I converted it. This was also the space where my mother lived in her last days, and probably the space I might live in my last days, unless I can get the hell out of here somewhere. Which is a possibility. I am trying to get a Polish passport, because my parents were Polish. I do qualify for Polish citizenship.
You spoke Polish as a kid, right?
Yeah, it was my first language. But the problem is Brexit. So many people from Britain have applied for Polish passports that there's a huge backlog, several years. So I might have to wait years to actually get my passport. But that will allow me to live anywhere in the EU. So I might do that. We'll see. But anyway, meanwhile, I'm here. And this is...
Well, Ed, one of the things I love about you is you're 83 years old now.
I'm 84.
Oh, you're 80?
I'm about
okay.
to be 85 next month.
Okay, so you're 84, and you just you speak of the future like, I was a big fan of Helen and Scott Nearing. They wrote "Living the Good Life," and they both lived to like 100 years old. And people used to always comment, even when they're in their 70s and 80s, that they speak in these long-term goals and plans. And that's something that I've noticed you do too.
I have all kinds of plans. Yeah, it's like time is running out, but yeah, I want to write about 10 more books. Photography, poetry, travel, cover all those grounds, tarot. But the problem is, like I said, I'm poor, and I have to spend my time selling books to pay my bills. But maybe this is my year to stop selling books and start going full-time writing. That's why I'm moving my book office there. So the book crap is out of my office, and I'll use that to focus on creating some books instead of selling books in the other office. So this office is for creating books, and that one's for selling books. But this is like just, I got all kinds of artifacts of my life here. My daughter's ashes are on the shelf here, and pictures of my ex-wives and my kids. Here on this wall.
Now, one of your daughters just recently moved into the rest of the house?
Yes, she lives upstairs. She moved here from Portland with my two granddaughters. And so the house is going to be hers. But I live here for free downstairs.
Live free in your own house?
Live free in my own house.
Can you show us the kitchen?
Yeah. So I consider this, I live in a submarine. So we're going into the submarine here.
And more books, of course.
And more books, of course. So what I should really put some torpedo tubes so I can load too.
What are the periscope?
Periscope, yeah, really, so I can look into the upstairs, see what my grandkids are doing. But okay, here's my kitchen. And I gave up my electric oven that I bought for $5 20 years ago, and went to magnetic cookers, so that before the stove was here. So now I have a pantry where the stove was, And the only thing I miss is an oven, but I have one of these little, look at this. This is a really hot item. It's a toaster oven with a round back so you can put a pizza into it.
Oh, yeah.
So this is all I need. This is my oven, my 2 magnetic burners, and that's my kitchen, my bathroom.
Well, one secret to your longevity is you're a pretty healthy person in the sense of, like, I've always noticed you eat well and, you know, you try to take supplements and things like that, right?
And, you know, get some moderate exercise. This is my leftover from Burning Man, my ever-going colored light show. William Blake.
Entertain you while you're taking a leak.
My guy, William Blake.
That's him, huh?
Yeah,
Okay.
This is him, life size. And my deceased daughter, Jan, she lives over here, kind of out of sight. But let me draw her. My darling first daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Jan, how's it going? Hey.
I got to meet Jan. She was a great lady.
Yeah, she was. I think of her every day. Miss her every day.
But you have you have Sierra and you have Cassie, your 2 other daughters.
Yeah, my youngest daughter, who was born in Mexico when I lived in Mexico, and she is now married to a television producer, lives very well. They invest in LA real estate, so I'm very happy that she found her guy. He's a really good guy. And they have 2 beautiful kids, so good work, Ed. Good work, Nosy. You know, stuff.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Ed, you met Louis L'Amour?
Yeah, when I was an author on the book circuit, I would go to book conventions and meet all kinds of authors, famous people. But Louis L'Amour was one of them because I was a big fan of his. So, you know, he was talking in a crowd of people after some lecture appearance, and I just went up and introduced myself and listened to him talk for a while. He was in the process of, he was talking about opening up a big, like, Western theme park, kind of based on his family saga, you know. So they were gonna, he was investing in this big venture, the next step, which, you know, I thought was kind of bullshit, but...
That's like Dolly Parton going to
Yeah,
Branson.
but he died about a year afterwards.
Oh, okay.
But I had him autograph some paperback that he had just come out, and I later sold that paperback for $400.
Wow.
So,
Autographed?
yeah, autographed Louis L'Amour. And it was fun meeting him. He looked pretty hale and hearty. And, you know, I was a real fan. You know, I mean, there are certain authors that I like. Larry was one of them. I was so thrilled to meet him, you know, like a real fan.
So you met Larry too, right?
Oh, yeah, I met Larry many times.
Tell us briefly about meeting Timothy Leary.
Well, my most memorable time, I remember, maybe it was the first time. I must have been the first time I met him. Again, I was at a book conference, and you know, it was at the Ambassador Hotel, which is where Kennedy Jr. was killed by Sirhan.
Right.
The same hotel, and that hotel's gone now. They've demolished it. So
Get rid of the evidence.
yeah, whatever, you know, get moved on. Capitalism, really. But he was to give a speech, so I went down at the back of the audience. There was kind of a railing, and all these tables were set up, and then the stage. And I was waiting for him to talk, and then I noticed that amongst the tables there, he was sitting at a table in front of me, like he's just, you know, like 10 feet away or something. So I said, "Fuck!" So I went around the curtain, and I walked over and I tapped him on the shoulder and said, you know, Tim, I think I called him Tim. And you know, which is kind of weird. That's a weird fan thing to do. And he's about to talk. He's with a group of, there's like 6 people at the table. And I'm really kind of interrupting. But somehow, you know, I'm a fan. Here I come. And his reaction kind of astounded me. That's the way, you know. He immediately got up and gave me a big smile, shook my hand. He said, "Wow, great to see you. Who are you? What's up?" You know, and he started this like solid, active, you know, totally focused conversation with me. Left, you know, forgot the people at the table and whatnot, and is having this talk with me, and and we start to talk. I start telling my, read your books, I'm a fan, whatever. And then they announce his name on stage. And now we present our featured speaker, Dr. Timothy Leary. And he said, God, Ed, it's so great to meet you. He said, but I got to go, okay? And he turned away, shook my hand, and walked straight up on the stage and started giving his speech. So it was so, awesome that he was so open to me.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really nice.
He just gave you his undivided attention.
That's it, the gift of undivided attention, the gift of attention. Great gift.
You fill in book orders, Ed?
Yeah.
This is kind of this is where you work. This is your job.
This is it, right? Kind of a mess right now, but it's always kind of a mess.
Creative people are always a little messy.
All right, thanks for the rationale.
Right.